Hi everybody, today we look at the new Gaea templates compatible with the current release version of Gaea 2. First thing, you have to install Gaea from quadspinner.com.download, and here the latest version is 2041, and just downloading it, installing it, and you can actually also use the winget install Gaea, that's even easier. And what you will get is the community edition that is limited to 1K export, but of course there are other editions depending what you want to do, it makes sense, but you can absolutely start with the community edition, and if you need larger resolutions than 1K, just upscale it to 2 or 4. That's actually working quite well for the beginners. So downloading it, installing it, and opening it, and then we have to use the template that I provide to get a quick start for exporting everything. The template is part of the PCG templates project on GitHub that you can download, or you just use the direct link, this bit.ly Gaea 2 template, that's also working. What you will get is a JSON file that is quite cool because you can edit it. And that is the one that you have to then open in Gaea 2. And what you will see is something like that. You have a couple of tabs here: Lithosphere, Hydrosphere, Biosphere, Color Maps, and Exports. And I recommend really to do something like that. Otherwise, you will drown in notes and will not know what actually to do. Looking here at the menus, I think the preview is interesting. Normally, don't put it too high, so 1K or 2K is actually enough, otherwise it gets very slow. Build settings is important. Here you can say where to export the stuff, what resolution to export to, and what's actually the height of the terrain that you want to build. That's quite important. And a couple of tools. You can automate the Gaea quite well, actually introducing variables and then building hundreds, dozens of different options with different variables. That is also a very, very powerful feature. So looking at the lithosphere, that is everything that is kind of stone, if you want, so the really base geometry. Here I combine a mountain with a ridge. With this combine node, the combine nodes is then able to give you a ratio. Is this more the mountain or more the ridge? And what is the blend mode or add mode and stuff like that? And with these many nodes, you can really combine your landscape partially, step by step, even using masks to only target a couple or a part of the map. The important thing that is that you, at the end of the day, you will create a portal, and that portal is your out node, and this out node will then be used in everything else. For example, in the hydrosphere to add things like rivers, seas, or snow. So jumping here to the terrain folder, you see there are a lot of primitives that you can use here, and of course all of them have different nodes and different options. And very important option, for example, is the seed that you see here on the right, because the seed is the random variable that will kind of define the form, and it's quite important for you to make it reusable and repeatable. So we have an example here. I took this mountain range, and we want to combine the mountain range with a combine node to everything that we did until now, the ridge and the mountain. And here, just really combining both of them, I plug it in from the output into the, that does not work, into the combine node, like here, hopefully, yeah. And then we just take the output from the other combine, put it in, and make that the new output for the portal. And here again we have this combine node, of course, meaning I can say, is it more influenced by the one or the other? And with that, really step by step, you try to create your physical geometry, and that is then your input for everything else, because after that you need water, you need biosphere, and we want to export, of course, a lot of maps, not only the head map, but very important, the many different feature maps, like where's the water, where is the flow, where's the rock, and so on and so on. So we start, of course, with the output from the lithosphere, and we want, for example, to add a couple of rivers to that. That is what you see, and the rivers, of course, influence the landscape, because rivers cause erosion, meaning the landscape will change. So we have to keep that in mind. Then we have snow and snow dusting on top of it, and all of them will create different kind of output maps again that we then can use later in later steps to either combine them or really to export them, for example, for PCG or for landscape layers to know where actually different layers are existing. Important is that we create a new out hydro lithosphere simply because the lithosphere was influenced. Then we can add things like rivers or seas and lakes to define things like, for example, the shoreline or where the water is and stuff like that. Quite important, in every step you think about, okay, what do I need to output? What do I really need as a mask later in my, for example, Unreal to place things. You can also combine these masks with something more complex. I want to have river shores, for example. So only where the rivers is, we want to have a couple of meters left and right where, for example, some greens are growing. So how do I do that? I start with the river mask, black-white. Then I subtract from it everything that is the lake, because in the lake there's no river, so meaning we don't need that one. So subtract it from there, then we have this kind of half rivers. Then we blur it a bit so that around the rivers we have this blur effect. That would be the area with some greens. And then of course we have to subtract the rivers from it to make sure that the river itself stay blue, for example, but everything around should go to green and should actually be a place for PCG to place some plants, for example, that are growing near water. And of course, very important, this is my, let's say, my final mask for everything that is water, everything that is non-water, and that is definitely something I want to export. Next step is the biosphere. So we start now with the new hydrolitho output, and we want to grow a couple of trees on them. The trees, of course, should only grow where there's no snow, for example, because it's too high, and where there's no water. So meaning we will subtract all these masks from it, and then these trees will be generated. And again, as every one of these nodes, you have many different options that you can do. And the output here is really a mask with kind of one white dot per tree, and that is exactly something that you then can feed into PCG. The coloring tab does nothing more than taking the current geometry and really color it according to the different masks that we created. So a base color is set on this texture here, and this base color will then be modified with every single layer that we have, like rock layer or soil layer or water layer and so on and so on. The process is always the same. First, I take this mask that I want to target, for example here the rock map. Then normally I blur it a bit, a very small tiny bit, otherwise it looks unnatural. Then I add a color or one of these super colors that are kind of set maps, and then I combine it with the original one, always using this blur as an input mask, so that only this mask is targeted and everything else stays the same. With that technique I can always 100%, so a ratio 1.0, overlay the old version, because I only target actually what is put on top of that. And with these layers, you always have to think about what lays on each other. So for example, snow, of course, is on top of everything, water is on top of everything, so they come quite late. Everything else you really do step by step, normally starting with the masks that are covering large parts of the landscape, and then getting more and more fine-grained and adding it on top of that. Here, for example, we have the peaks. Again, we blur it, then we do a color here. We have this kind of gray color, and then switching between them, you see that the peaks are getting this gray color on it. If you want to change that, we just go here to the super color and change one of the set maps settings to anything else that I like, or to a simple color, but that normally looks like a bit unnatural if it's not water. And then the same thing happens. You see that now the peaks are getting a bit more darker. Doesn't matter anyway, later we will put snow on that. So same thing. Here, for example, we have the lake mask, and that of course should be something that is bluish. Oh no, sorry, that was the shore, that's kind of sandy. Now comes the lake, where we actually put a lot of blue on top of it. Now we have the rivers, and then you see, I have to zoom in a bit. Here are the rivers kind of starting in the mountain and going to the lake. Then of course we have this, what we built here, these river shores, they should be green, for example. And here you see there are little rivers, and only around the rivers you see this green influence. Then we have things like snow, that is not a super color, but this clutter, that is just one single color, or actually a range of two or a couple of colors. And at the end we have this gamma, kind of fine graining a bit the darkness of the whole thing, and that is again something that we then can export. So these color maps are really important if you want to give your whole landscape a base color, but quite often you do things like, for example, as I demonstrated in an older video, doing a 3D model of it in Blender. So always the same thing, think about what is my input mask and what kind of color do I want to put into that mask in a layer thinking. Last tab is the export. Export is really right click and export, and it essentially takes a mask and puts it out into normally kind of image format. PNG 16 would be for Unreal, for example, because it doesn't support more than 16 bits deep. depth. Then you have an export path. And here, for every single mask that you want, you can export these things. There are a couple of special things, like, for example, putting it into Unreal, that will already put it into an Unreal target size, or exporting an FBX mesh that you can directly plug in as one big mesh in Unreal, so a static mesh. But with Nanite, that's actually possible and doable, but it's a bit tricky with the collisions that you then have. And of course, exporting also our standard mask that we could use, for example, in Blender, doing a 3D model as demonstrated in an older video. But it is, in a nutshell, at the end of the day, if you modeled it really all, best case, you really just concentrate on the hydrosphere and the lithosphere. Then at the end, you just define how big is my terrain, and really export it all, normally in the working directory that you have here. You also have a couple of statistics here. How long does it take actually to build this stuff? These nodes are not very complicated, but you can really make it quite complex that it takes a couple of minutes or longer. And then at the end of the day, you just start a build. And what will happen is that each of the export nodes that you define here will have this mask generated, this PNG generated, and you see something like this here, that you have a folder with, of course, your final Heightmap. That is something that I will put as a Height into Unreal. And then, of course, as many as you want of these masks that you then use, for example, to define your landscape layers, or to give PCG a hint where to put certain static meshes, and so on and so on. Quite easy, really. So, maybe last mentioning, there's also an Unreal plugin that is quite cool that you should try out, where it's kind of helping a bit with the import process of the Heightmap into the landscape layer, but that might be another video, but there are also already videos on it. I hope that helps. Thank you very much. Bye.